Hello and welcome. My name is Dawn Durham. I'm an educational consultant with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. The session you are about to view is referenced as a quick pick. It's meant to be a quick pickup of information pertaining to a specific topic that you're interested in learning about. Today we're talking about alphabet knowledge. Before we begin, I want to make sure we all understand the mission of PaTTAN. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local educational agencies to serve students who receive special education services. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. Here's what we're looking at today for alphabet knowledge. We're going to define the alphabetic principle and discuss its importance in decoding. We'll discuss alphabet knowledge and why it's essential in early literacy development. We'll share instructional practices because it's not enough to know the information, you then have to understand how to take that information and turn it around into practice in your classroom. We'll also share challenges with letter naming. As with anything, there are always challenges, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for those. Let's first take a look at the alphabetic principle and why it's important in our ability to decode words. The sounds we hear in our language overlap with printed symbols. This overlapping of sounds to print is the alphabetic principle. Because the alphabetic principle is this overlapping of sound and print, in order to read any alphabetic language system, you need to understand its alphabetic principle. For example, if I were to attempt to learn how to read or write Greek or Russian, two language systems that are alphabetic, I would need to learn how the sounds or the phonemes of that language relate to the printed symbols of that language. We're going to take a look at alphabet knowledge or letter naming knowledge. Letter naming is knowing the form or shape of the letter, knowing the name, and the corresponding sound that the letter makes. There are three ways in which we measure letter naming. Recognition, if we put a sheet full of letters in front of the child and asked him or her to locate a certain letter we dictate. Production, showing a letter to a child and asking them to name it. And writing, producing the written form of the letter. Letter naming is the only constant property of a letter. Let me show you what I mean by that. What's the name of this letter? You would say A. What's the name of this letter? A. What sound could this letter make? A. What sound could this letter make? A. And what's the name of this letter? A. Each of these symbols have the same name, but their sound can be different and their shape can be different as well. The only property that stayed the same was the letter name. Children need to know the letter name for it anchors their knowledge so they can acquire the multiple shapes or forms the letter can take and the varied sounds the letter can make. Letter naming needs to be accurate and automatic. We want automaticity with letter naming. That means the letter identification is effortless and occurs so easily that it is literally easier to read the letter than not read the letter. It's important to remember that accurate and rapid letter identification leads to accurate and rapid word reading. There is a long history of research supporting the predictability of letter naming knowledge in regards to later reading success. Since the 1960s, research findings have shown that letter naming predicts later reading achievement. Preschool through kindergarten children with poor letter naming knowledge are more likely to struggle with learning to read and are more likely to be classified as having a reading disability. We know that difficulty with letter recognition has shown to compromise early reading development. Although letter naming is a precursor skill for reading, it really is a simple form of reading in itself. A student who is accurately and rapidly recognizing letters is really letter reading. Now that we understand why alphabet knowledge is so important and the reason we should spend so much time working with alphabet knowledge in our classrooms, let's talk about how we do that. So I want to share some instructional practices with you, and they're quick and relatively easy to implement so you can turn these around right away in your classroom. When thinking about alphabet knowledge instruction, I want you to keep these guiding principles in mind. First, we want to have multisensory teaching. Multisensory teaching is connecting eye, ear, voice, and hand. And we want to connect all of these pathways for students to strengthen those neurological pathways in the brain. We want to be mindful of the sequential presentation of letters. So you wouldn't want to introduce B and D together because of their similar shape and form, as well as the similar sounds that they make. Early identification and intervention is key. We know that identifying students early on who struggle, we can help intervene and put supports in place to better help them acquire the skills necessary for later reading achievement. Short spurts of practice more frequently is going to be more beneficial than longer spurts of practices infrequently. So we consider that frequent distributed practice a key piece for instruction. And if we want students to be able to identify letter names quickly and accurately, we want to be teaching to automaticity. We want to be doing it so the students are very quick and automatic at recognizing these letter forms, these letter shapes. And I hear so often from teachers that my students don't know how to proofread. We can start teaching this essential skill at the very early stages of literacy, and I'll show you how we're going to do that through some of these instructional practices. All right, let's take a look at some things that I think you'll like. You'll enjoy them because they're quick, they're easy to implement, and you can take them and turn them around in your classroom right away tomorrow. Matching and naming. This is something quite easy, and you probably already do this already. You take 3D letters, put them in a bag or a basket, have the students pull one out, and match that 3D letter to the printed letter on the card. The key piece here is, and I think we oftentimes miss this, is making sure that when the child pulls the letter out of the bag or the basket, they are naming the letter, not just matching what it looks like, but pulling out an M, excuse me, pulling out an M and saying, this is the letter M, and matching it to the printed card. Alphabet strips, much like you see on students' name tags on desks, what a teacher does is dictate or call out a letter name, and the students point to that letter on their alphabet strip. You also can walk around the room and point to different letters for different students. Perhaps you know that a group of students struggle with one letter versus another. You can kind of differentiate your instruction that way. 3D letters with sequencing mat. Let me show you what this mat might look like. On a chalkboard, a whiteboard, even a piece of big construction paper, a teacher would write A, M, N, Z for the students. The students then receive the 3D alphabet tiles or magnetic letters or whatever you have in your classroom. They take the rest of the letters and place the letters on this sequencing mat in the correct sequential order. Then what you want to do is go back and have the students point to each letter saying the letter name. Remember I talked to you about proofreading? Here's a great strategy for proofreading. After the children have put all of the letters on the sequencing mat, have them go back, point to each letter, and say the letter name. Not just sing the alphabet song, but point to the letter name and say its name and match it to that shape and form. Excuse me. Instant letter recognition charts. You do this too, you probably just don't even realize it. Have a piece of paper with the letters in random order on rows, time the students for 1 minute, see how many letters they can name in that 1 minute, and the next time they do it, challenge them to beat their score. Missing letter decks. My students always really enjoyed these. What you'll do is you'll make letter decks that look something like this. Notice there's a strand of letters with one letter missing. The students pick up the letter card, they read the letters that are present, A, B, C, and they have to insert the missing letter, D. Notice on the first card there, I have the fourth letter missing. And on the second card, I took out the second letter. My suggestion would be, on the first couple of times that you do this, take out the fourth letter of the string. Just stick with that for a little while. Get them used to the process of identifying the missing letter, saying the strings that are present, inserting the missing one, before you go playing around with where else in the string of letters you take them out. But I would also keep it to just 4 letters on a card. You don't want to overwhelm them with too many. You don't want too few as in like 2 or 3. 4 is a good number for that missing deck game. Alphabet battle. This is similar to the game War that kiddos play with those card games. So what you do is you have the 3D letters in a bag or a basket. You have each child pull out a letter from that bag or basket, and they're looking to see which letter is closer to the letter Z. So for example, if I pull out a J and my friend pulls out a D, my sentence would be, J is closer to Z, I win. And I take both the letter tiles. Next time around, we pull out 2 letter tiles again, and we look to see which letter is closer to the letter Z. Another suggestion, I would have one of those alphabet strips handy just for reference for the kiddos. I find it makes a big difference in their confidence and their willingness to play again and again. Alphabet bingo, you can't go wrong with bingo in your classroom at any point in time. What we'll do is we'll just switch it up a little bit. So each child chooses 7 of the 3D letter tiles from, again, a bag or a basket. They place them on one side of their desk. As the teacher, you call out a letter name. The students repeat that letter name. If they have it, that letter on their desk, they take it from one side and move it to the other side of the desk. Once a child has all 7 letters moved from this side of the desk to this side of the desk, they call out bingo. Guess what? This is a great game for our friends who are really struggling with the shape or the form of the letter. You have a student choose a 3D letter tile from that bag or basket, keeping their eyes closed. What they're going to do is feel around that letter to see what the shape feels like and try to guess simply by looking at the shape or feeling the shape. And then Super Sleuth. This is another one my students always really enjoyed. You go back to that letter, that ABC arc that I showed you before. You have 2 partners fill in the arc together. One partner closes their eyes or turns around if you're worried about them peeking. And partner 2 takes away 1 letter somewhere in the arc, whatever letter they choose. What I had my students do was once they took away a letter from the arc, I had them push all the letters together so there wasn't an obvious space anywhere in there. Partner 1 uncovers their eyes or turns around and has to guess which letter is missing. Once that was done correctly, the 2 partners put the arc back into the shape that it belongs in, and it's now partners 2 turn. Again, what I like about these activities are they're relatively quick and easy for you to implement, but you get a lot of bang for your buck in the instructional time that you'll spend teaching your students how to play them and then releasing that responsibility to them so they can play that by themselves, with a partner, or perhaps with a volunteer older student that might come into the classroom. Let's talk about some challenges when we think about letter naming. As with anything, there are always challenges. We want to acknowledge that and work through those together. Letter names are arbitrary, meaning there's really no reason the letters have the names that they have. That's just what they were given. The shape of some letters are similar and therefore can be easily confused. You can see that these 2 letters have similar form and making it more challenging to differentiate between the 2. Here are another 2 that can be easily confused based on form alone. Capital and lowercase letters may look different too. What I want you to do is take out a blank piece of paper and fold it in thirds. Your paper should look something like this. On the left column, write the word same. On the middle column, write the word similar. And on the right column, write the word different. Think about the letters of the alphabet, both capital and lowercase pairs. What I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is to think about the letter pairs, sort them by these 3 categories. Which capital and lowercase pair are the same, which capital and lowercase pair are similar looking, and which capital and lowercase pair are different. So go ahead and pause this video, take a few minutes to do that with A through Z capital and lowercase pairs, and pop me back on when you're ready to take a look. Okay, here's what I came up with. The letters that have the same capital and lowercase form are going to be easier to learn than those that have a different form for the capital and lowercase letters. So thinking about your students, can you see where they are struggling? Can we identify why this might be? Then you also have letter names themselves that may sound similar. Think about the letter names A, J, K. We hear the long A sound. How about these letters? E, G, P. We hear the long E sound. I, Y with the long I, and so on and so on. These similar sounding labels can become daunting for children. Say the letter name F. For that letter name, the first phoneme or the first sound is a vowel sound, then a consonant sound, F. Now say the letter name Z. That letter name starts with a consonant and goes to a vowel, Z, E. Children can become confused based on hearing a vowel sound first or a consonant sound first. Let's add into the mix letter names that are only vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, U. You can start to see how the structure of the letter name may be similar and can be confusing for children. Let's think about the factors that influence letter learning. These factors may add to the challenges we just discussed, or they may assist a child in letter learning. We want to explore some factors that influence letter learning. You see here these three factors, and we'll go into depth about each one of these. The first factor is the letter position in the alphabet, where the alphabet lands on the alphabet string. Laura Justice and her colleagues in 2006 looked at this notion in depth with 4-year-olds. The idea being that students learn those letters presented earlier in the alphabet at a higher rate compared to letters presented later in the alphabet. When Justice and her colleagues conducted their study, they found that letters positioned earlier in the string of the alphabet had a slight advantage over those letters positioned later in the alphabet. Let's talk about the shape distinctions, or the way the form of the letter is made. Some letters have straight lines, some letters have curved lines. I want you to take out another piece of paper. Write down some letters that have just straight lines. Can you think of some letters that have only curved lines? Let me show you what I have. There's a letter with only straight lines. There's some letters with only curved lines, but is that all the letters of the alphabet? Nope. Then we have to take into account those letters that have straight intersections, those letters that have curved intersections, and we still have letters that have diagonal intersections. You can see the shape of the letter is certainly a factor to consider when learning letters. Again, it could be to help a student with the letter formation and knowing the letter name, or it could hinder their learning of that letter. The last factor I want to talk to you about today in regards to letter learning is rate of exposure. Remember I told you about Laura Justice and her colleagues looking at letter acquisition in a study with 4-year-olds? What they found was the children learn the letters in their own first name at a higher rate when compared to letters not in their name. An even greater rate was the identification of a child's initial or first letter in his or her name. The study showed children were 11 times more likely to identify the initial letter in their first name as compared to letters not in their first name. This phenomenon, however, did not transcend into those children's last name. We haven't really talked about letter sounds, and before we summarize our learning on alphabet knowledge, I want to make sure to get some quick thoughts out there on letter sounds. We really want to be able to link the phonological and orthographic processors, or the sound system, and where we house our letter and letter pattern combinations in our brain. And knowing the letter name and the letter sound is a link to these two processors. We talked today about what a letter is. We said a letter is a shape, a name, and a corresponding sound. We don't want to forget about that piece. We want students to know that the symbol we have now attached a name to also has a corresponding sound. The last point I want to make is that knowing the letter name is a springboard to learning the letter sounds. Studies have shown that connecting both letter names and letter sounds was found to be more beneficial than isolating the two. So let's think about what we talked about here today. We talked a little bit about the science behind reading. We talked about the importance of alphabet knowledge on later reading achievement. We shared activities to foster alphabet learning. And again, I like those activities because I think you could turn them around right away tomorrow in your classroom. There are certainly obstacles with letter learning, and we shared some of those. as well as factors that could influence letter learning in a positive way or a negative way. Both of those are present. I want to invite you to visit our PaTTAN website. There are valuable resources, not just on literacy, but on all areas in the academic world, as well as the behavior world, here on our website. So please be sure to visit www.pattan.net. It will be worth your time spending some time exploring that webpage. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I'm glad that you decided to get a deeper understanding about alphabet knowledge and its importance in early literacy development. My contact information is there. If you have any questions or need some further assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.